Britain has a long history stretching back thousands of years. In every part, at some point, a bloody or mysterious event has taken place. Murders, bloodthirsty revenge, plagues, punishment and folklore will make your flesh creep in terror. This is Mysterious Britain, Tales of the Unknown. Throughout history, murderers have tried to hide their crime in all manner of bizarre ways, but some would take it to the extreme in their vileness, as in the case of James Cook. James inherited his late master's bookbinding business at the age of 21 and continued trading in a workshop off Wellington Street in Leicester. In order to have continued, James had purchased new tools from Mr. Pass of London. In May 1834, James received a letter from Mr. Pass saying that he was coming to collect on the debts owed for the tools. On the 30th of May, Mr. Pass arrived in Leicester and began collecting debts from his other customers, one of which he said he would return to collect. Mr. Pass then visited James and mysteriously disappeared. That evening, James went to a local pub called the Flying Horse for a beer and a game of skittles. He acted in his usual calm manner, only with a small purse full of coins to raise any suspicion. He returned to his workshop at 10:30, stating that he had work to do. The following night, neighbours were alarmed by the sight of flames behind the workshop's drawn blinds. Fearing the worst, one neighbour managed to break down the door and discovered a large piece of flesh burning over the fire. James explained that he was cooking horse flesh to feed his dog, but this was human flesh. Hanging from a cord in the chimney were 2 thighs and a leg, hacked apart by a knife and saw. A full search was made of the warehouse, and the neighbours discovered a bloody trouser leg with some of Mr. Pass's belongings. In the grate of the fire, they discovered human bones mixed with the ashes. James was convicted of murder and hanged. His head was shaved and tarred, and his body hung in a gibbet on the outskirts of town. With some buildings in Britain having such a long history, it is plausible that some may be haunted by past residents. Many have made claim to be Britain's most haunted house, but in the case of Barley Rectory, this may be true. Barley Rectory was built in 1863, replacing an earlier rectory on the site that had been destroyed by a fire in 1841. Local legend tells of a Benedictine monastery, supposedly built in the area in about 1362, according to which a monk from the monastery conducted a relationship with a nun from a nearby convent. After their affair was discovered, the monk was executed and the nun reportedly bricked up alive in the convent walls. The first paranormal events reportedly occurred in about 1863, since a few locals later remembered having heard unexplained footsteps within the house at about that time. On the 28th of July 1900, 4 daughters of the rector, Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, saw what they thought was a ghost of a nun at twilight, about 40 yards from the house. They tried to talk to it, but it disappeared as they got closer. In 1928, Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into the house. Soon after moving in, Smith's wife, while cleaning out a cupboard, came across a brown paper package containing the skull of a young woman. The family reported a variety of incidents, including the sounds of servant bells ringing despite them being disconnected, lights appearing in windows and unexplained footsteps. In addition, Smith's wife believed she saw a horse-drawn carriage at night. The ghost of the nun was seen so often in the dining room window that the family had it blocked up. One of the spirits may be Marie, who was a French nun who left her religious order and travelled to England to marry a member of the Waldegrave family, the owners of Barley's 17th century manor house, Barley Hall. She is said to have been murdered in an older building on the site of the rectory, and her body either buried in the cellar or thrown into a disused well. The house has undergone numerous investigations over the years, which have experienced poltergeist activity, though skeptics claim that the hauntings of Barley Rectory are fabricated or explainable by natural phenomenon. Being buried alive is a common fear that is unlikely to happen, though this ghastly fate struck Mrs. Blunden in 1674. Alice Blunden was middle-aged and described as a fat, gross woman who had accustomed herself many times to drink brandy. One evening, after suffering a headache, she drank a large quantity of poppy water and fell into a deep sleep which she could not be wakened. An apothecary was consulted, and it was concluded that Alice had died. Her husband had urgent business in London and left instructions that her funeral should be deferred until his return. However, Alice's relations considered that, the season of the year being hot and the fat corpse, it would be impossible to keep her, and she was accordingly buried without further delay. A few days later, boys who had been playing nearby reported hearing a voice from the grave. They were initially disbelieved, but the voice was heard by others and the grave was opened. The body was found to be badly bruised, which was thought to be the result of injuries inflicted by Alice on herself in her confinement. Being unable to detect any continuing signs of life, those present at the scene lowered Alice back into the grave overnight, with a view of summoning the coroner the next day. On their return, they found she had torn off a great part of her winding sheet, scratched herself first in several places, and ripped off her mouth. It was all gore and blood. She was at least definitely dead.